Hi, my name is Trina, and today I'm going to be taking you with me on my very first trip to the stunning city of Berlin in Germany and showing you some of its gorgeous bookshops. This was a spur-of-the-moment trip for me. I found a cheap ticket for a 12-hour train ride there and back, and I thought, let's do it. Let's take a solo trip to Berlin for the very first time. I knew I needed to try and visit as many bookshops as possible during my trip, but Berlin is a massive, sprawling city, so there was just no way I would be able to visit all the bookstores, especially when my priority was doing other tourist activities. But I did try to make an effort to visit as many bookshops near the city center as possible to give a little taste of what bookshopping in Berlin is like. Before we dive into our first bookshop of Berlin, it will shortly become apparent that I do not speak German, which actually makes this the first place I've ever visited solo where I don't speak the language, which is very exciting and I'll talk about more at the end of the video. But also because of that, I do my very best with the pronunciations in this video using Google Translate support, but please feel free to correct me on all of my mispronunciations in the comments below. But now it's time to start with the very first bookshop I came across on my trip to Berlin. My very first bookstop had to be the absolutely massive book department store near the center of Berlin where all of my train stations were, called Dussmann das KulturKaufhaus. This place, like I said, massive, 5 stories, a great place to start out to see literally every single book I could imagine, every cover I could imagine, and obviously I couldn't see them all, but it was a great taste tester of German covers. I've seen so many memes online about how questionable German art covers can be sometimes, and while there were some examples, like this version of the Jasmine Throne was not my favorite version of that cover, but overall, and I'll talk about this a lot in this video, I really like some German covers. They really go for it with some of their art, and it makes for these like really bright, vibrant covers, and therefore really bright, vibrant bookstores across Berlin. Such a great experience that I was only just starting to get a look at in this first store. They also had a separate English bookstore within a bookstore. Their international books section was basically like entering a separate bookshop. In scouring this section is when I first started realizing how good German book prices are. We were looking at a 1350 euro paperback, which I think is like $15. Dollar's gone down so much recently, so don't quote me on that, but it is much cheaper than paperbacks in the US these days. And while I didn't buy anything yet, I did have a thoroughly good time looking at all of the absolutely stunning covers, and it was just the beginning of what was to come. Hello? Look at this. I mostly spent my first few days touristing. One of the highlights I wanted to mention was I visited the Tempelhof Airport, which is an old airport from the time when the Berlin Wall was still up that's now been converted into a massive public park that you can bike in. Absolutely stunning. And I made some other stops too before it was Sunday morning, and therefore it was time to do a flea market run across the city. And our next book stop was right next to one of the flea markets near Boxhagener Platz. This bookstore, Shakespeare Sons, I believe is a part of a chain or is inspired by bookstores of similar names in other big European cities. This was also a combo bagel shop, so this is actually where I went for brunch. It's such a great little seating place. They have a no laptops policy for the weekends, which is so smart because it's obviously their busiest time, but it still allows for people to come and take advantage of the study space and the workspace during the week. It also smelled incredible in here because of the bagels, obviously, and had an incredible combination of used and new books on the shelves, some of which were at a fantastic price, and some books which I was seeing for the very first time. For example, I found this series called Rosewater that I'd never heard of and instantly added to my sci-fi reading list of new series I want to start because it seemed really interesting. There were also some great deals on books here. Like I said, some were used. I saw a copy of The Natural History of Dragons for only like €8 approximately, which I think is a great deal. If I didn't already have it just checked out on my Kindle at the very minute I was in this bookstore, then I might have picked that up. But like I said, I stopped here for brunch, sat down, ate my bagel, read a little bit, people watched. Overall, such a cozy space. And just down the road from Boxhagener Platz, where there is a flea market hosted on the weekends, where I also found a huge number of book booths with used or new or interesting or different books out in display or in boxes. It was incredibly packed here, so hard to find my way forward to the books, and so many interesting German books as well. And from Boxhagener, I took a train to Mauerpark, where there was another flea market also on Sunday mornings that was even bigger somehow, more spread out, more food options, and you guessed it, more books as well. Huge news. I have found my first city in Europe that knows how to make really good chai. But it wasn't until the third day of my trip that I decided to really commit to seeing every single bookstore that I possibly could within a few hours. After grabbing my chai, I started out with an amazing little place, a hole-in-the-wall kind of place called About Books and Coffee. I say hole in the wall because it literally feels like it's built into a wall. They have a great decor style that's very simplistic. It allows the books to speak for themselves, and it really matches the style of the building really well. Sorry, I'm just obsessed with the architecture of the building and everything like that too. But the books inside were also really, really great. There was a very curated mix of both English and German books, and so many books that felt right up my alley that I'd never heard of before. I picked up books like Brotherless Night, Atlas of AI, A Fish Caught in Time, and more nonfiction as well that I'll talk about at the end of the video. There was even a graphic novel version of The Giver, which I didn't even know had a graphic novel, which is amazing. I wasn't a massive fan of the art style, but The Giver was one of my favorite books as a kid, so I thought that was a really cool find. Right down the street from About was another bookstore called Sonnenhaus that I also had on my list. I didn't realize this from what was said online, but this is a German-only bookstore. The lady inside, when I came in and was like, "Hi," in English, looked at me and she was like, "We don't sell English books." And I was like, "That's so fine. I'm just here to enjoy the vibes of your bookstore." They had these boxes of sale books outside, this really cute art. And in general, I liked their layout. I love when bookstores have ladders. That's a personal design touch that I love. It gives me such great Beauty and the Beast vibes. And if you read in German, this seems like a great little place to hang out and pick up a used book. Still in that same general neighborhood, there is one more bookstore, this one an English bookstore, called Do You Read Me? This is another really interesting, curated bookstore, even more so, because the majority of the books here seem to be, independently published or unique mediums and different ways of consuming books, primarily focused on social justice issues. The prices were a little bit crazy. Even the simplest paperback started probably at 30 euros, but I can't really complain because I did actually end up buying something here, so I have no room to speak. I added so many interesting books to my TBR here. There were also just some fun books, like this wood blocking book. There's also a standard paperback selection in the corner, but I was more interested in the larger independent published works that I've never seen anywhere else before. Okay, so I did buy something that was 30 euros, and I really probably shouldn't have. But I couldn't resist. I started reading it and I wanted to read the rest of it so bad. In order to balance out the $30 curated books, the next stop was a used bookstore, Antiquariat Wiederhold, I think it's pronounced Wiederhold. Some Swedish accent might be slipping in there. Sorry for the pronunciation, but this place was stunning. Everything you could want from a used bookstore, starting with the smell when you walk inside, was just that woody book ink, book binding solvent smell that it's just absolutely divine. They also had these beautiful prints near the front that were also on sale that seemed to be taken out of old books. And overall, a great used selection, mostly in German, but I did spot a couple of English books, including this random copy of Hundt, which I loved as a kid, so that was a fun throwback. But yeah, I wanted to buy those fungal prints, but they were like €5 each, which I just felt was like much for one print. But side note, my best friend would have loved them, so I almost bought them for her, because she loves prints like that, and we both love fungi. But yeah, stunning used bookstore, great prices, peak used bookstore in Berlin if you're looking for one. And then literally on the other side of the street, right around the corner, was a new bookstore called Ocelot, not just another bookstore. This place was another cafe combo bookstore, and they had, again, a pretty large English selection, as most news bookstores in Berlin did. But I was really fixated on some of the German covers in this bookstore, because oh my god, some of these covers are beautiful enough to like want to learn German for, so that I can buy the German editions of these books, because they are just divine, absolutely lovely. This place is also back in the realm of normal book prices, around 15 to 20 euros probably for a new paperback. The people that work here were also divinely nice. They were so sweet. When I asked if one of the bookmarks near the front were free, because I like to collect them for my travel journal, she made sure to grab one of every single variant of bookmark they had, and some of their stickers that they use for their bags so that I could put them in the travel journal, which was just the sweetest thing ever. And I also did try their iced chai, and I can vouch once again, Berlin does chai really well. This was delicious, and they told me I could take the cup and the glass straw across the street to the park to sit and drink if I wanted to, which is just such a fun an option, and if I had time before my next tourist stop, I absolutely would have done that. The next time I picked up the bookstore hunt, I actually went to a neighborhood that I only went to for the bookstores, but I'm so glad I did. Along this street, Kastianienallee, were a ton of glorious little coffee shops and bookstores and overall amazing vibes. It was such a pretty place, and I'm glad the books drew me there and I got the chance to go. First, I ran into this comic book store called Modern Graphics that wasn't originally on my list and was just total happenstance that I walked by, but I decided to take a quick look inside, and I really liked their setup. It reminded me a lot of just comic book stores we have in the US too. They also had a massive graphic novels section, including graphic novels in English, which is obviously appreciated. And I did spot one graphic novel that I added to my want to read called Renegade Girls, which I loved the look of. I don't know, has anyone watched Cinderella 2 and Cinderella 3? Those like cult classic Cinderella follow-up. The drawing style in this reminded me of the animation of those movies, which is like pure childhood nostalgia. And I'm really glad I ran into it on the way to my next stop, which was Love Story of Berlin, which is a English bookstore. I think this one and Do You Read Me are the two English-only bookstores on this list. Love Story is a great little spot, a very classic English bookstore, primarily books I had heard of for the fiction section. Again, though, the nonfiction section here totally took me by surprise. There are so many books I've never heard of. Maybe it's just because I'm paying attention to the nonfiction section for the first time in my life, but so many books here that seemed so interesting, and this version of The Playground by Richard Powers. But yeah, so many nonfictions. Can someone find me a city in Europe that's as obsessed with sci-fi and fantasy as Berlin is with nonfiction and literary fiction, and Scandinavia is with noir fiction? Because I need to find like the fantasy capital of Europe stat. Also, I'd like to take this moment to complain about how the new editions of Emily Wilde's Compendium of Lost Tales is so much taller than the editions that people would want to buy just to get you to buy 2 editions. It's like the European version of releasing a book in hardcover for a year first, and it pisses me off. Give me the small Emily Wilde editions, please. And then my last stop on this street, Kastianienallee, was BUCHBOX, a bookstore that I believe is probably a part of a chain, but I'm not 100% sure. This was the only location I went to. Again, loved it. Primarily new books, primarily full price. They again had a little coffee shop combo, but at this point I'd had like 3 chais that day, so I didn't take them up on the additional chai offer. But I did give this place a nice browse. They had all of their English books in a cute little English corner section that, I don't know, I found very adorable because it's a great way to display their English books when they didn't have so many of them, but then they could put them all together on these shelves. And I hope you're getting the sense of how colorful German covers are just by this section, because it just feels so bright and cheery and lovely. And I did grab a couple of additional books for my TBR from here, like Whale Fall, which seem really interesting. So it shows that even a very small English section can make a big impression. But yeah, overall, the German books also looked incredible, really interesting. There was a fungus encyclopedia that I was a huge fan of. But yeah, I was really sad to leave Kastianienallee, probably one of my favorite streets that I've been to in Berlin so far. But then for our official last stop, I was on my way to visit the cathedral, and I thought I could squeeze in one more bookstore even though my phone was very near dying, and that was Hundt bookstore. Already the signs on the outside were giving me a very good impression. I had high hopes, and they did deliver. I love this setup. This reminded me of like a San Francisco bookstore in a lot of ways, just the way that they had their sale books set up and the way they displayed a lot of their books felt pretty similar. I don't know if that's just me. I've been to so many bookstores now, they're all bleeding together. But I really liked their English literary fiction section. A lot of gorgeous literary covers in English and also obviously in German. And as well as this was the first place I noticed a significant number of sprayed edges. And I don't know if it's something about these German editions. I normally hate sprayed edges, but I didn't mind these that much. But yeah, that was my final bookshop stop of the tour. She's sitting on her nest. Look at them. I love swans. I wonder if they already have babies or if it's eggs that they're sitting on. I don't know. There were some other bookstores I wanted to stop by that were closed. There were some tourist things I wanted to stop by that were closed. That's what I get for doing a last minute trip. But overall, I can safely say I adored Berlin so much. I was really not expecting how much I would love the vibes and the people of this city. And for a solo trip, I think it went really smoothly and I was happy with it. The highlights for the tourism section were definitely Tempelhof Airport, Charlottenburg Platz, all of the history museums. I learned so much on the trip outside of the bookstores, but also inside the bookstores. There seems to be a huge emphasis on history and nonfiction that really impressed me. And I just had a really good time, and I can't wait to go back to Berlin and see more bookstores on my next visit. But with that, I was on my train ride home to Sweden. Hi, hello. I'm back home after a 12-hour train trip that was somehow less exhausting than a 5-hour plane ride would have been. I'm back from Berlin. I didn't buy a ton, I don't have a big book haul, but I did just want to talk about it for a second because this was my first experience ever solo traveling to a country in which I do not speak the language whatsoever. I speak zero German, despite both my parents speaking German. I speak no German, and I was really nervous. Especially, it's a lot different going into bookstores where oftentimes like these independent bookstores are very small and you want to interact with the shopkeepers, the people that work there, but you don't speak their language, and you also are really interested in the books they have out, but you don't speak the language of the books. So I was sitting there with Google Translate, like translating covers to see what I might be interested in. It's still Germany, there's still a lot of English books, and pretty much everyone like learns English as a second language, so you can get around. I just really wish I could interact on like a primary language basis, but it was still a lot of fun. Also, I really recommend Germany for book buying because the books were pretty affordable. Like the standard new paperback in a bookstore, I believe, was running around 13 euros. So I think it's like 15-16 bucks, like US dollars for a paperback. That is a good deal to me. Coming from a country where right now US paperbacks are sitting around 20 minimum. I did feel like there were less sales than, if I can say that. I might be, it's sometimes just like timing. I was only there for 4 days, but I do feel like there were fewer like book sales than maybe there were when I was visiting Oslo or when I'm in countries where books are more expensive. Then they try to do different systems to buy books in bulk, so then they can sometimes have like sale stacks and things like that. And I saw fewer of those, maybe just because books overall are more affordable. There were fewer used bookstores for like a big city like that, but I make no strong judgments on Berlin yet because it was my first time ever visiting, and while I did go a bit about, it's a really big sprawling city, so I couldn't see every single bookstore there, so this was just based on my sample size that I went to, but I still really, really enjoyed it, and I loved those bookstores. I had a really good time. And I did buy one book, and this, you saw it, I showed it on a video, but this was actually 30 euros. And I am a person who, I've said multiple times in this channel, I try not to buy books unless they're in a used bookstore for under $10. Like unless there's a specific cover or special edition or something I'm looking for, I break that rule a lot. For like a random book, I really try not to buy them unless they are used and on sale and under $10, because I know how easy it is to just buy a million books if I don't have that rule for myself. But I went back and picked this up and put it down and picked this up and put it down probably like 5 times. Like the guy who worked in the store must have thought it was completely insane. This is Let's Become Fungal by Yasmin Ostendorf Rodriguez. This is an independently published book, at least I think it is, or maybe independent published isn't the right word. Indie publishers, maybe, so not self-published, but like indie published books, maybe that's what I would call it. Like, that's probably why these are so expensive, because they're a lot harder to find. When I Google it, I can find it on thrift books for maybe like $7 cheaper, but just because of the format it's printed in, like you see, it's like really a unique printing style, and it is this kind of like coffee table book size. I think that's why it's so expensive, and that's also why I felt like it was worth it for me to get, because this is the kind of coffee table book that I want. I sat down and I just read like a couple of sections in the bookstore, and I could just imagine myself like sitting down with this book when I want something just to like read on my couch. So this is the perfect coffee table book for me, and the cover is gorgeous and the concept is really interesting. As you can see, all the chapter titles are printed on the front. It's really cool. Illustrations by Rami Gonzalez. It is Mycelium Teachings and the Arts, based on conversations with indigenous wisdom keepers, artists, curators, feminists, and mycologists. That's everything I love. I love fungi and people who study fungi in reflection to the human experience and all of those things, and people who are studying fungi in reflection to colonialism and feminism. I'm incredibly, incredibly interested in. So I had to pick this up. And I don't know if I'm gonna like sit down and read it all the way through. I don't think it's that kind of book, but I might read a chapter here and there and maybe mention it on my vlogs in the future, just because I love fungus. And I really am so happy I bought this. I'm really happy with this purchase. So I feel like this is a case where I'm okay with spending 30 euros because I supported a small indie bookstore, I supported an indie publisher, I supported a lesser known artist and author. And it's about a concept that I'm incredibly, incredibly interested in. Okay, I'm happy with this. But although that was the only book that I bought, that wasn't the only book that I found cool. And I briefly wanted to mention that I added so many books to my TBR from walking around that I like took pictures of. Books that I thought were interesting, but maybe I would prefer the audiobook of, or I would be okay with reading on my Kindle, or they were just like too expensive in the moment and I wanted to know more about them before purchasing. So I have so many books for that, the majority of which are nonfiction. I did get 3 that weren't nonfiction that I'll mention first. Whalefall by Elizabeth O'Connor sounded really interesting. I added that to my TBR. Brotherless Night by Vivi Ganeshananthan sounded really interesting as well, and has won prizes, and I've not seen it in any bookstore before this one, so I thought that sounded really cool. Which bookstore did I see that in? It was a really good one. Yeah, I think it was About Books and Coffee. I saw that one in, and it looked really cool. And then I walked into a comic store and I saw this graphic novel called Renegade Girls by Nora Noose and illustrated by Julie Rabin that I love the concept of. It's like sapphic historical fiction, and I think they're solving a crime. I might be solving a mystery. I might be wrong on that, but I think that that's what the book is about. And I loved the art style in this. I think I showed some clips of it earlier, but it had a really fun art style, and so I added that to my TBR. And then I have so many nonfiction books that I just wanted to briefly mention and show pictures of, but I won't give too many descriptions of because the descriptions are kind of in their really long titles. They're long nonfiction titles. We have Atlas of AI, Power, Politics, and the Planetary Costs of Artificial Intelligence by Kate Crawford. I'm in my studying and intrigue about contemporary AI era right now, just trying to understand it better. Unshrinking, How to Fight Fat Phobia by Kate Mann. Enough said, sounded like a really interesting book, cool cover. The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wolleben, which seems to be like trees communicating. If you've read The Overstory by Richard Powers, this one sounded like that kind of vibe, and I was really excited. 10 Birds That Changed the World by Stephen Moss. Enough said in the title. Weathering by Ruth Allen. This one seems to be more like planetary systems. I'm hoping some geology. I just read The Blighted Stars, a sci-fi book where it talks about geology, so I thought that sounded cool. How to Speak Whale, A Voyage into the Future of Animal Communication by Tom Mustill. After reading earlier this year, I forgot what the author's name was, after reading Bitch on the female of the species, where she talks about communications in whales and whales having like bigger brains, much bigger brains for their size than humans do, and what that means about their ability to communicate. So cool. Eve, How the Female Body Drove 200 Million Years of Human Evolution by Kate Bohannon. I always get a little nervous these days when I see like feminist biology or feminist evolutionary texts, and I'm like, is this written by a TERF? I'm kind of concerned, but I literally flipped to the first page and it's already addressing trans people and the trans existence. So I was like, immediately that was like a check for me. Like, if I can read books about feminism and biology that aren't trans exclusionary, amazing. Deficit, How Feminist Economics Can Change Our World by Emma Holton. Enough said, sounded cool. Enemy Feminisms by Sophie Lewis. Again, going into the TERFs and like white feminism and kind of reckoning with that. Dark Laboratory on Columbus and the Caribbean and the Origins of the Climate Crisis by Tao Lee Goff. How all these subjects are going to fit together, I was really, really intrigued by. And then I literally got home and my sister mentioned that someone recommended this book on a podcast she was listening to. And I was like, okay, shot to the top of my list. Wise Animals, How Technology Has Made Us What We Are by Tom Chatfield. Again, kind of on the, I'm interested on human intelligence, machine intelligence kind of wavelength right now. And What the Wild Sea Can Be, The Future of the World's Oceans by Helen Scales. Again, love me an ocean, love studying climate change. So I'm kind of on my nonfiction arc, and I was kind of running out of nonfiction books that I had pre-existing in my TBR before this trip. So I was really happy to stock up my holds list with nonfiction audiobooks and physical books to read. So I just really wanted to shout out all those books because it may be a while till I get to all of them. And if any of them sound up your alley, I would recommend checking them out. But that is it about Berlin and this bookshop tour. I hope you enjoyed the tour portion and the little book discussion afterwards. If you have any recommendations for other cities in Europe or other bookstores that I should go to in Europe, that's where I'm based out of at the moment and I would love to go, so please feel free to send recs. And for books, always send recs, of course. Please feel free to leave a comment, like, subscribe, whatever you want to do. And I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye!